Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar. This is a topic that has intrigued me ever since you first posted about it. And I just want to give a little framing about who I am, who Superstruct is, why we talk about big topics like this. And Superstruct is a very unique consulting agency, and we focus on projects that benefit our species 3 generations from now. My focus is on agriculture production. So how do we feed people in a world as it will be? I have other partners that focus on housing and community or water, energy, health, things like that. But we narrowly do focus on those companies that whose founders share a belief with us that there is a possibility, that there is hope, and that it's really our highest and greatest to work towards those things. But if you think about the founders and the amount of stress that any founder is under, especially one with the, trying to stave off existential threats, they really need to be sound body and mind. And Karen, I'm so happy that you've agreed to come out here today and talk to us a little bit about the neuroscience, the leadership, and a lot of other things too. I've seen the agenda. We're gonna hit a lot of categories and topics here, but I think it'd probably be interesting for folks to know just how we even met. So do you want to talk about what that looked like, or kind of what that first spark or connection was that really made us understand who each other was and how we thought?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who's joining us or listening even after the session. Um, I think that there really aren't a lot of accidents in life. Things happen, but I do think that we met for a reason and that we're all, interconnected. And so the first time that we really met, we were in a room and I was doing a panel discussion and you were there. And I remember that you were talking about like when the light switch, like who walks into a room and thinks about the light switch going on and I was like, it really was a legitimate light bulb moment that there's this entire other like information and topic and things that like I just never thought about. And like that is what is so endlessly exciting to me about humans and like all of our potential. Like our human potential is like we each have this unique kind of set of knowledge and gift to share with the world. And when we come together with other leaders who like think differently, then we all grow. And so that was the first time I met you. And then like we went for a hike, I mean, a couple weeks later, and we, you know, to like really get to talk, we started talking about quality and Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. And I just found it really, really interesting and fun that, here we are both doing this work around like the legitimate quality of life. And I think that that is one of the most exciting things too about just the collective potential that we have to make overall quality better for everybody all the way around this generation and 3 generations from now. So thanks for having me.
No, and that's a really good point. I was, going coincidentally, there are no accidents. I was talking to someone yesterday about an inflection point in my life and how that book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, put me on a completely different path. And it wasn't anything to do with motorcycles. It was the Greek Socratic philosophy, the early Greek philosophy on quality, and my just fascination that these people, just with their brains, could figure out astrology, could figure out physics, just thinking about it. And for me, that was just a revelatory moment. And in my life, I think I can count on my hand the number of people who have read that book. And the ones that can have a quality conversation about it, you're the only one I met. And that's what blew me away. I was just absolutely stunned that there was another human on the planet that even had gone down that same rabbit hole that I did. And, it brought me back to college. I took courses in early Greek philosophy so I could understand what the words meant and why they meant and why they were used in that sentence structure. It was remarkable. But I think that's why we became fast friends, is that we're both just sort of research nerds, really, too. I'm more of a nerd than you are, obviously, but I love
Oh
doing those
no,
deep
I'm a
dives.
big nerd.
Well, speaking of that big nerd, who are you? What do you do? What's your background? Where are you? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I'm a first generation entrepreneur helper. I was put here to give love and quality to people. And, I kind of stumbled into this work. I do speaking, coaching, and consulting based around wellness and leadership because we spend our life at work and, unfortunately, many people are not well. And so this has, a pretty profound impact and ripple effect in the world because how we show up day in and day out, to that tune of what we were saying a few minutes ago, it has a huge influence on our effectiveness as humans, to really, meet our potential, and kind of capitalize on the energy and the time that we do have here.
All right. Well, that sounded almost rehearsed. So let me think about who I am. Like I said before, for Superstruct and myself, it's a combination of missions. I work on projects that benefit our species, 3 generations from now in a world as it will be. So my highest and greatest is working for people whose parents haven't been born yet and giving them a chance on a world as it will be. I also dabble a little bit in cybersecurity, but like was earlier said, I am a big nerd and I love topics like this. And the whole reason I asked Karen about this, she had posted an article, gosh, probably almost a year ago or many months ago on neurotransmitters and how these little chemicals in our brains influence our personalities, our decisions. And not only is it that you're wedded to the fate that you were born with, you can change these things through exercise, diet, other breathing. I mean, my goodness, how much we've learned about breathing is astounding. And that article had stuck with me for a long time. And I think I bugged Karen. I may have bugged you or didn't bug you, but at least I thought about it a lot. I'm like, I got to get Karen out here to talk about this because she's so much smarter than I am. I'm going to learn something. So this is one of those where I'm excited to sit in the audience. I know this is more of a dialogue, but I do want to give you plenty of microphone to talk about this. So why don't you give us a sort of a macro framing of neurotransmitters, the brain science, and all that? The only experience I really ever had was my partner in Superstruck, Rach, loves dopamine. So I didn't really know what dopamine did or was. So go ahead and chat here.
So I'm actually going to start one step before neurotransmitters, and that's at the really, really, really simple one. And so I don't know if people are listening or watching, but I'm going to roll over my little whiteboard here. And so basically, my background was in corporate leadership development, support, and physical therapy. And so when I started this business, it was really like, hey, how is our physical wellness influencing how we show up as leaders, how long we get to do it for? How's that influencing our risk? How is it influencing our spending? How is it influencing, all of our, sustainability overall? And so what I saw was that there was this kind of relationship, and that's the one that I call the PMCT relationship. And that's basically our physical wellness is, I believe, the foundation for kind of everything that we do, because our physical wellness affects our mental wellness. Now, some people are like, well, our mental wellness affects our physical wellness. And this is where that, chicken or egg neurotransmitter, it goes. And I said, well, your brain is an organ, so it's a physical structure. So I'm going to say, hey, let's say that it starts with the physical body because we can control that and it does control us. So our physical wellness affects
Well, and
mental.
I just want to point when we spoke last, I guess another one of our walk and talks in the woods, you brought this up. And I said, yeah, that makes sense because if you're lethargic and you're sitting on the couch and you need to do exercise, you got to get up and do it. You got to break
Mhm.
that habit. Otherwise, if it's mental, the mental will keep you on that couch.
Yeah, I mean, it's inertia. Objects in motion stay in motion. Objects on the sofa tend to stay on the sofa. So that physical wellness affects mental, mental, physical, and these influence how we communicate and connect with the world around us. And so this communication and connection also influences how we feel. And so it's like, well, hey, again, if we can control how we feel, then we can control our mind and we can control some of these conversations and reframe some of those narratives. And then these three things, the physical wellness, mental wellness, and communication, they influence how we experience time, and how we utilize our energy in the present, as well as how much time we actually have on the earth. And so with the physical wellness, a big part of that is our posture, because our posture influences those neurotransmitters. Our posture influences the quality of our sleep. Our posture influences everything that we do. It even impacts like the electricity in our body and our like the current and things like that. So these things not only influence us individually, but also like our tone and energy that we put out into the world. I'm going to stop moving so it focuses.
Well, I'm going to go back to what you said about the time there. A recent webinar that we did was on Kairos, and there are 2 ways to measure time, Chronos and Kairos. Chronos is linear, it follows the clock. Kairos is measuring the moments rather than measuring minutes. So maximizing that time there. So going back to your formula here, if you got the P and the C and the PMC together, then the time is going to be so valuable. It'll be such a rich Kairos moment that you have there.
Yeah, Yeah, and you have more quality because then, to your point, you're actually present instead of somewhere else or, anxious and thinking and fearing, what's going to happen in the future or feeling anxious about something that happened in the past that we can't control, and so that's where that physical, mental, okay, well, when you're spinning, what's something that you can actually do, and that villain, victim, hero triangle, I say you always want to be your own hero. Breathe. Tell your hero to breathe. you know, Keep it simple. Come back to yourself, return to this moment. Because when we spend those moments stressing about the future or stressing about the past, to your point, we're losing that incredible moment that is the now.
And another thing too, and this is one of the things I do associate with you, is your talks on posture. It's something that I never thought about. I mean, maybe, my mom would tell me as a kid, don't slouch, or something like that. But I never really thought about it in a really deep, meaningful way as I am today. So number one, I appreciate your focus on that. I do want you to talk more about that. Number two, one of the things I asked of you early on was, can you give me a little lesson because I do stand up desk. What is the correct posture
Yeah.
for a stand and why? And the diaphragm and the breathing and all the alignment. And then one of the things you said was electricity and energy. Can you talk more about posture and kind of how that influences all these things and anything else you want to talk about?
Oh my gosh, sure. Would love to. I'm a total geek about this. So I like when I first started this business, people were like, all she does is talk about posture. And I'm like, well, actually, I'm an executive coach and I'm a leadership coach and I do these trainings about communication and, come in and look at like what's working and what's not working in terms of risk and things like that. But yes, we're going to talk about your posture and your wellness because it influences how you feel when you walk into the room. It influences how you breathe. It influences, your risk for, not just infections, but the secondary infections. And so, yeah, like there's some really simple things with posture. And that's, just to remember, we are supposed to be stacked from the ground to the ceiling, like the buildings that we live in and work in. That's how we are much more efficient. We have in our body marathon muscles and sprint muscles. And when we're not in the right posture, then we're asking sprint muscles to run a marathon all day, every day. And this takes energy. And so if we want to return some energy to ourselves, because everyone's like, I'm tired. Like, I know. It doesn't have to be this way. Hey, when you're sitting in your office chair, instead of sitting on the squishy part of your behind, sit on the bony part, get yourself more upright. It puts us onto these bones instead of sagging and hanging on these like muscles and ligaments. And then it also puts us into this position to, yes, better provide oxygen and blood flow. Because when we are overusing these different muscles, what then happens is we sometimes go into pain, spasm, pain cycles. And then if you've ever had pain, you know that that takes up a tremendous amount of rent in the brain. And then you can't focus on other things. And then two, whenever we as creatures are feeling pain, we're also going to be automatically more reactive, more defensive. We're not going to be able to be creative and imaginative and futuristic in our thinking. And so it's like, hey, put a post-it note on your computer. It's free. Change the color once a week. Use it as a visual cue to sit up and breathe. Close your mouth, breathe through your nose. It's going to help you to filter oxygen. It's going to help you to better regulate your blood pressure and heart rate, which are going to influence those neurotransmitters and chemicals in your body. Now, you were talking about a standing desk. So at the standing desk, I was actually just talking about that this morning with somebody. So a lot of people tend to stand with their feet together and their knees locked. We also, there's some of us, before we, started recording, we were talking about slippers and barefoot. Like, I'm a huge fan of barefoot. Like, I'm a huge fan of getting outside barefoot, getting your feet in the grass and grounding every morning. But, we need to be connected with the ground because this is safety also in terms of risk down the road for slips, trips, falls, and head injuries, which cost people time and money and independence. And so when you're standing at your standing desk, I encourage people to, move around a little bit anyway, but if you widen your feet to about shoulder width apart and you soften your knees, what happens for a lot of people is they'll feel like they can actually engage their legs and their glutes. They'll feel like, oh, hey, I can activate my core. Oh, hey, now I can get my abdominal contents to rest into my pelvic cavity, which is going to help them to work better. It's going to help to preserve the integrity of the pelvic floor as we age. And your pelvic floor works with your diaphragm, so that's going to help with your oxygen again. So when we're sitting and we're standing and we're moving, not only do these affect us professionally, but, let's be honest, they affect us personally as well. Because how we feel in our body, our flexibility and our mobility influences and impacts our ability to get out and connect, to do the things that we love with the people that we love, out in the world, at work, and even upstairs in the bedroom for people. It's all related to how we feel. We're designed to be with people, not alone and isolated. And so the physical health is really the key to all of it.
It is, and that is a beautiful framing. There is another side of the coin, though, to your posture, and that is situational awareness. And the
Oh,
image that you portray to others, I don't have the same issues in public that you would as a female, and understanding those nuances and how you're positioned. Would you mind talking more about
oh
that
my
as well?
gosh. Yes, absolutely. So I teach one night a week as an adjunct professor, and I'm a woman, and I've been assaulted. And like, it's so critical in this day and age that we are aware of what's going on around us. And when most of my students are international, when they come here, the first thing I talk to them is about their posture and their safety. I say, look, like most of them are in technology, they're engineering, data science, healthcare information students. I say, put your phone down, put your computer down. Let's teach you about how to communicate and connect. Take your earpods out. You can't lead people if you don't understand them, and you can't understand them if you don't watch and listen. So with the situational awareness, when we're taking our earphones out, when we are learning to sit and stand right, we're going to be able to engage those marathon muscles. We're going to be able to, again, tune into our intuitive ability. One of the first things that I taught my girls, because I have two young girls too, if it doesn't feel right, you're right. We have those primitive, wordless inner knowings. And when we are congested, when we're sitting in this slouched posture and we're compressing our GI system, our gut, that is our first brain, cannot work properly. We can't absorb nutrients, not all this, that, and the other, but we're going to lose that sixth sense. And so, to that tune of when we are in the right posture day in and day out, and breathing day in and day out, going out and being physically active, because on this continuum that is our health and wellness, we are either getting stronger or weaker. And as we age, we tend to get weaker. We have to actively preserve and protect this ability. And so, yeah, so when we are, even if we can't get to the gym, becoming more mindful of our posture and our position and the muscles in our body, and how do they feel? How does my body feel in this moment? We're going to be safer, and then two, we're also going to be more empowered as individuals to speak up when we say things, which is going to help to not only protect ourselves, but also to protect the people around us.
I can't remember exactly what it is, and you probably know this. I was told early on in my career that if you're going on stage, you should do this first. I can't remember if it was do a high kick or a stretch or something, but you're supposed to do something that then energizes your body before you get on stage so you walk out to the applause and acclaim that you deserve.
Well, I did have a beautiful experience of going up to a speaking school in New England. It was this like amazing thing. They were heroic public speaking. They didn't teach me to do a high kick. They did teach me to do some things with my voices. They taught you to like pound your chest so that your voice comes out more, to breathe. Um, and so I'm like, gosh, what else did they teach? And it was just kind of move our jaw, articulate. But yeah, before I go on stage, because I love, like when I started this, it was like, I just want to change the world, one room, one leader, one room at a time. And I just want to save lives. And so for me, when I go to speak, like, what I always do before I go out there is I say, let my words be a gift every single time. And then I do usually listen to some hype music, usually on my way there. But, I No, I don't know if it's a high kick, but next time maybe I will try the high kick because I do think that, it could just be good fun. Although I do think that for some, especially the weekend warriors, they might throw their back on if they're not used to it.
And I was told early on too, you always are more impactful when you stand and speak rather than sit and speak.
Yeah.
So just an anecdote. I was in Montreal late in October giving a speech, and it was a panel, so we're all sitting down. But I had an important point to make at the end, so I stood up and said it. Everyone was like, "Oh, he's standing up." I'm like, "Yeah, it's important."
I did a panel discussion a couple weeks ago, and they put a chalkboard behind me, and I'm a professor. Like I can't sit there on a panel. So sure enough, I'm like, oh, let me get up. And then two, to the point of the posture itself, like the automatic postural muscles in us, like, in person, I can show you on the spot how to activate these muscles and the difference when you're standing in the right posture and the less efficient posture, like automatically. And so, yeah, like when you're in person and you stand up, yeah, like it's just different.
Well, I'm excited since you were kind enough to send me a look at the agenda today. There's a point on here that was unexpected. I'm really, really interested in this one. And it starts out with culture and beliefs, and it ends with the smell of whether it's sweat from stress or exercise. And I can't wait to hear what you got to say about this.
Well, so, we all know, we've all walked into those rooms where it's just like there is an elephant in the room. There is like someone's afraid of having a heart attack. Like culture is contagious. It is. It just is. We as creatures, again, are wired to protect the herd, right? And so, in this study, like they looked at, there's studies about high performers and low performers. And if you're around high performers, you're going to increase your performance by, 15, 20%. If you're around low performers, you're going to drop like by like 25, 30, 40%, So that's why you want to have a high performance culture. So there was this study around, people who like they had these people who would either jump out of an airplane skydiving, and like the smell of sweat of that, or get on a treadmill and run and the smell of sweat of that. And then they took these control groups and they said, how to like, essentially, how does this make you feel? And so they had no idea what they were smelling or what was going on, yet physiologically there was a huge difference. And so, like, again, it speaks to just as creatures, like we know and we feel so much more than we even kind of give ourselves credit for. And like, again, to speak to just random research that I find myself reading at late o'clock at night, even last week I was looking at this article on plants, and they were saying that your house plants can sense you before you even enter. And then I think I either sent to you or I at very least thought of you, and
Oh, I saw
how,
that. Yeah.
we go to the woods and like, do the woods feel us when we return? And so it's like, okay, bringing it back to the corporate aspect of it, if our plants can feel us before we walk into the room, what is our staff feeling when they know we're coming into the office for this meeting? Are they excited? Are they dreading it? Like, what are they feeling? And so it's like, we can't control what anybody around us thinks, says, or does. We can only control ourselves. And so it's like in those moments, we should be always thinking like, am I arriving as the highest, best version of myself? Am I honoring myself? Like, what is the potential impact, if I don't take care of myself? Because for many leaders, they do feel that mantle of responsibility. And they may or may not be able to control certain things, but that executive presence, good, bad, right, wrong, it is what it is, will impact success.
Yes. Again, not coming in with a negative note every time, but in your bulleted points there, you do have alcohol. And,
Mm.
as a person who's managed many people and many teams, some with alcohol issues, I know that that has a significant impact on their productivity, their performance, attitude, everything else in the work environment, not home alone. So anyway, would you want to speak a little bit about that?
So alcohol, I mean, like again, there's no good, bad, right, wrong. It just is. I think that, to each his own, everybody is their own captain of their own ship. I don't know, like I talk to my girls like look at what's changed in smoking in our lifetime. I'm 41 years old. Everyone used to smoke. I used to go out to the, late o'clock at night and I'd come home and you'd have to take everything off because it reeked of cigarette smoke. I think that alcohol is kind of going that same way because alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. It affects our sleep, it affects our hormone levels, it affects our regulation. And so, like, am I going to say that I never have an adult beverage? No, I do. I enjoy some of it here and there, occasionally. But I do think that as many cultures are starting to look to the future and they're starting to look at the cost, like there's so much risk, in these cultures that it's like, hey, let's go out to happy hour. That's the only thing we can figure out to do with you guys outside of work to connect with each other. And all right, it's going to put you at risk for drunk driving. It's going to put you at risk for saying something you shouldn't say. It's going to put people in uncomfortable, to the point of assault, situations or risks or things like that. And then it's going to impact their sleep. It's going to impact their motivation the next day. It's going to impact their insulin. It's going to impact so much in terms of their productivity. And if that person has a meeting the next day, it just doesn't make business sense, and I've worked with all kinds of leaders who do all kinds of things. And I can say that, it is something that I usually encourage my clients to track. I don't tell them you have to change anything because I don't judge anybody for anything. I'm just like, just keep a tally and see what you notice. For my clients, they're looking at their sleep. See how it influences your sleep, because our sleep has a profound impact on our life and our brain health. Because when we're talking about our physical wellness and we're talking about our sleep, we're talking about either we're removing inflammation from our body or we're not. Either we're storing stuff to our long-term memory and working on like critical thinking and, just overall brain matter preservation and enhancement and plasticity, or we're harming it. And so as we're looking at this future where people will invariably live longer just because of the technology that exists, let's try to make it a little bit better for ourselves and do the things that we can to make sure that the brain that we do have works right.
Mm.
So,
No, you're right, and thank you for saying all that as well. And that kind of leads us really to the heart of the matter and the neurotransmitters, neurotypes, and what have you. And what are those chemicals actually doing in our brain? And I assume this is part of the rabbit hole that you were recently in, and I can't wait to hear what you found.
well, I mean, long story short, it was, like everything that we do. I mean, it influences our different, or like all the neurotransmitters in our body, all of them. And, like to the point of serotonin and dopamine and endorphins and enkephalins and, like all of those things. I'm not going to go and test anybody's neurotransmitter levels. what I can say
Oh, and
is,
I guess an important piece for housekeeping. What we are talking about today is not medical advice. We
yeah,
are
yeah.
not doctors. Do not go out there and inject yourself with serotonin or dopamine or whatever. So,
Yeah, this is all just food for thought and things that like I always encourage my clients, do your own research. This is stuff that comes from my brain soup and research. And like in my opinion, like I am not like there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Because it's like, who paid for it? What do you want it to prove? So when I'm looking at information and things like this, like I love to incorporate just kind of everything and then say, does this just make sense? And when people come to me and they're saying, I'm tired, I'm not motivated, I don't feel good, it's okay, let's solve for that. Even when I was in physical therapy, or even with my clients now who have neurological conditions or the people around them do, it's okay. All right, you got this thing. All right, perfect. We're not going to make that an excuse to be a victim. What do you want? Where are we going? Let's go. And so, to the tune of what can we actually control? What we do know for sure is that physical activity can help us to increase some of those healthy chemical levels in our body. It can help to reduce, in some cases, for some people, symptoms of depression, anxiety, all this, that, and the other. It just makes sense when we are more physically active and we do the things that we can control, then that changes how we feel about ourselves. It changes what we see when we look in the mirror. It changes what we say. And I do encourage my clients, crazy or not crazy, to speak to themselves and practice conversations in the mirror, see what you're doing, see what's happening. have a real honest conversation with yourself with, what do you see? Are you symmetrical? Are you holding tension? Do you feel tension somewhere in your body? What's keeping you up at night? What's waking you up? What's going on? And is it serving the highest, best version of yourself? And to your point, the ripple effect that you are creating every single day, everywhere you go, every room you walk into, whether it's at work, at home, or even just the things that you're saying to yourself when you're sitting alone on the sofa. And so, basically what I did find in this wormhole last night was just that, yes, there is this connection between these neurotransmitters, our development, and how we present to the world. And yes, it is different, but of course it's different. Look at the diets of people around the world. It's different. We're all different, but we're all also the same. We're all human. We're all doing the very best that we can with what we have. And we're all trying to connect with other people to enhance this human experience. And so that was, part of, why when we did the DISC assessment the other day, it was like, all right, well, let's talk about connection. And so with a lot of my clients too, one of the things that they're feeling stress around, especially this time of year, because it's the holidays, with all the conversations that they have to have, they're like, this is what's keeping me up at night. And so that's like, okay, well, how can we positively influence that? And that was where, I do the DISC assessment. And then like all of this is kind of based in human science that dates back forever. We all have kind of, these similar buckets that we can tend to fall towards, obviously we're, again, our own unique and special flower. But that was kind of the communication thing that we had talked about the other day.
Well, going back to DISC, I mean, there are so many different personality evaluation tools out there. Some I've taken many of them, including DISC. Thank you. And many of them I felt were off the mark. A few I felt were on the mark. What made you choose DISC over all the other tools, and how have you found it to be in line with what you're trying to accomplish?
I love DISC because it's simple. Because again, I'm like, hey, let's keep it simple. The science of it again dates back far. And it can be applied right away to better understand ourselves and better understand the people around us, and to connect with them. And again, in today's day and age, we have all these different generations of people. We have a lot of people who really, really struggle to connect with people. They just don't know how. And so this is something that I teach to my students. It's something I run for my clients. I run for their spouses, because not only can it be applied, to understand ourselves at our highest self, but also when we're in a primitive state. And that's where we as leaders and humans find a lot of people right now. This is a very fear-based society. You're talking about existential crisis and things like that. There are, like, again, real threats that can be diffused just by having a conversation and understanding where that person is coming from. So for anybody who doesn't know, I'll do kind of like a quick overview. So again, I like this. I mean, Myers-Briggs is great. I was looking at culture and like there's so many cool tests, but this one I like because it's just easy. So we're going to make some broad sweeping generalizations.
Would you like me to pull mine up so you can point at that, or would you prefer to do whiteboard?
So we'll do the overview first and then we'll talk about yours. All right. So generally speaking, people tend to fall into the categories of more extroverted or more introverted, right? So generally speaking, we have individuals who are more extroverted or introverted. Generally speaking, we have individuals who tend to be more task-oriented or more people-oriented. Task-oriented, people-oriented. So over here, we have dominant individuals. Then they tend to be more extroverted and more task-oriented. Then we have influencers. They tend to be more extroverted and more people-oriented. Over here, we have steadiness, who tend to be more introverted, people-oriented individuals. And then up here, we have C, who the compliance individuals tend to be more introverted, tend to be more task-oriented. So each one of these styles has a primary need and a primary overextension. So this is one of the things that people find helpful when they're trying to connect with their children sometimes, because they don't see them a lot all the time. So the primary need for a high dominant is for control. Primary need for an influencer is attention. Primary need for a high S individual whose steadiness is for harmony. Primary need for a compliance individual is for safety. Now, overextension for these individuals, because again, we're going to see people, not always at their best version. So the high dominant tends to look like anger when they're overextended. The influencer tends to look disorganized. I can say this is absolutely positively true because that's me. The high S, they tend to be overwilling. This is where you are, Andrew. They tend to say yes when they should say no. And they're more introverted, so you don't always see it. Extroverted, you tend to see when they're angry. You tend to see when they're excited. Compliance, their overextension tends to look like criticism. So each one of these styles, when you're talking to them, there's a way that you can kind of help them get what they need, help you get what you need. So the high dominant, they're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. The influencer, they're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. These two are, they tend to look at the present and the future. They go fast, they make decisions fast, they're easily distractible, and they're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. These two individuals, the S and the C, tend to keep these people from driving off the cliff because they're looking at the information from the past and how that influences the present and will influence the future. So in a team, in a family, we tend to want a balance of all of these. Sometimes we find ourselves, only really hiring birds of a feather flock together, one kind of individual. This works, until it doesn't. Because, sometimes we have somebody that can't do something, or it's a super huge flex for their natural strengths. And then that creates stress for that person. It creates stress for the team. It creates stress for the environment. And then everybody feels it physically. And mentally and emotionally. And this is what drives, team endorsement and cohesion, is when we know these things and can think back to it. And so, to your point, the reason I love the assessment is because it's like, okay, here's this assessment. It's going to tell you where you tend to fall. It works like an order of operations because, all of us are a blend of all of these. But then it helps us to meet other people where they are, which saves us time and energy, which is what I also like. And it's like a 30-page report. The first half is for you. The second half is, hey, here's a quick reference guide for how to deal with all those other people out there.
Well, that's the important piece is the communication between the parts, because if you don't know or you don't recognize where you are and how the other person's processing information, the communication will never be right. But once you understand it, then you can accommodate those different ways of communicating and what have you. And
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to learn more about that as
Yeah.
well. Because
Well, and these tend to stay the same over your lifetime. So that's why you can usually apply. Like I tested my 10-year-old and 100% it's true, and to that developmental neuroscience and behavioral science, yeah, it tends to be the same because your neurochemical regulation is tied to this. And that's where that wellness and leadership component, it's like, hey, it's not good, bad, right, wrong. When you're communicating with this person, you're going to understand hey, I make this flex and it's going to make it easier for you and for me. When you're talking to me, you're like, hey, Karen, there's a butterfly over there. Come on back over. And it's just before the pandemic, we were mostly in the office. And then you throw in a pandemic where people, for the very first time, many of them thought about life and death and the very real fact that it might come for them. We took each other away, we created these social isolation cubes. So now we're missing that stimulation that we get, and we are drastically increasing people's risk for failure to thrive. When people were used to come into to rehab, to PT, I said, get into outpatient PT ASAP, because you want that person in the car for the visual stimulation, for the social stimulation. We need it. If we are not growing and interacting, we are contracting and dying. And so it's so pandemic, social isolation, but then too, you put masks on. So now we're also missing the facial expressions. Then you put phones in each other, and this is why people don't know how to connect. I had a student to me this semester, when I was talking to her about situational awareness and taking her ear pods out to be safer and things like that, she says, I became so much more sensitive to the world around me. I was going a million miles an hour and everybody was in my way. Now I hear what they're saying. I see what they're doing. I'm watching their behavior. I'm watching their body language. Was she a better leader before or now? Is she a more intuitive and safer creature then or now? And it's just like when we can connect with and understand people, it doesn't just make their experience better, it makes ours better too. It makes our life feel more worthwhile and valuable. Makes us feel better, feel like, I'm not gonna lie, helping you feel better helps me feel better too. Like,
Well, speaking of helping me feel better, you kindly did a disc assessment for
do
me, and
you have yours close? Love
and
it.
so yeah, so this is what it came out as, and you demonstrate on your phone different things about me. So I'm eager to open up the kimono here and let you tell the world what I am.
Yeah, so I was really excited that, like, I love running this on my friends and for my clients and again for their spouses. And so when you sent this back to me, I recall you were like, I'm not sure if I believe this. And I was like, well, here's what we see. So we have this natural style and this adapted style. Our natural style is how we generally tend to show up in the world. And then our adapted style is our perceived need to adjust, usually in the workplace. So when I read your report and I see this, I say, okay, Andrew's natural style is he is a high S individual. He likes harmony. He likes steadiness. He tends to be more introverted. He's fiercely loyal to a smaller group of people. And the other thing about most of my high S individuals is not only do they think about the present and steadiness, but they're thinking about preserving that steadiness far into the future, which when I read that and just kind of knowing you, I'm like, well, that speaks perfectly to what Andrew does 3 generations. I'm looking down there because I have seen this with so many of my high ask clients. I want to preserve the steadiness for all of the people around me, not just myself. And I love that about you. So, following the order of operations after that is, you're extroverted, high I, and then D, so you can still get things done. And then over here is your compliance, so you're SIDC. So then we come over here to your perceived need to adjust. So right now, you're in this position where you're serving more people out there. You don't know them as well as you know the people closest to you. So you're making a huge flex for your high I. So you're decreasing the steadiness because there's only so much energy on this continuum. So you're taking away some of this to flex your socialness extroverted, like outwardly for the world. Your dominance is staying kind of about the same, not a big change there, but you're bringing up your level of compliance a little bit to make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, numbers, information, data, or all of that stuff is available in there. So you're flexing a little bit to provide that safety and security for the people around you. So that was what I saw when I read your assessment.
Point on, even that translation, again, another nuance, another level in there. That's
I mean, like, we're all just, doing the best we can with what we have. But if there's ways that we can do it better and faster and more efficiently, then why wouldn't we? And that's the beauty of what you guys do is you help to increase efficiency and save energy. And that's, one of many reasons why I love you guys and appreciate you so much. So,
well, yeah, and the language, the communication, so many different things.
oh,
One
goodness
of
gracious, my computer just had a whole mind of its own. So I'm just going to bring you over here for like a up close and personal.
There you go. All right.
Hey,
Well, I
thanks.
was going to say that, now that I've shared my disc, would you want to share yours with folks and kind of because I think it'll be instructive for others who think like you do.
Let's see if I can do this without.
Or we can just go to open discussion too, if your
I
computer's on the
think we should
floor.
just go to open discussion because I'm having for sure one of those like literal technical like adventures.
For real. It's a hardware problem, it looks like, not a software problem at this point.
Yeah.
MC, I know I think you're still listening. I don't know if you are or not. I'm
And
just
hi.
curious. Have you taken the disc assessment? And if so, what did you come out? Where were you?
I have taken it. I was just like looking back at this to see if I could find mine. I think I was like somewhere between, I think I was mostly C, but also I.
Okay, so
I
high
guessed
C,
you were
high.
C. We were doing this, I'm like, oh, MC's a C. I can tell.
I would think that you are probably a high C because like you're super with information and data and like taking systems and processes and kind of organizing and collecting and curating and like making a beautiful path forward. So I would think that it is that. And then
And
um
I'm overly critical.
You have it coded in humor, so we take it.
well, I mean, and that's the thing, like all of it is like we as human beings need play. We learn faster through play. And I say all of this because it's like, yeah, none of us are perfect. Our overextension is not pretty for any of us. But when we understand that, then when we see people in that moment, it also helps us to understand like, this isn't a personal attack on me. This is a sign that my friend is overextended. Or they need more information so that they can better provide me with what I need, or that they need a little bit more control over this, or they need more information to drive the ship because they feel responsible, or this person, the high I over here is disorganized. Like they're just trying to do so much. And I think that that's the best thing about this is that it really helps us take that moment to pause and say, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with me. This has everything to do with what they need from me so that we can both be successful.
Hmm. So, Karen, I know we're kind of coming up to the end of this time that you've pledged to me, and I do appreciate this again. This has been so enlightening. What are some things that we or our audience can do for you? I mean, disc assessment sounds fairly simple, and I know you mentioned to me that you're getting a lot of inquiries now from people, not only in the business community, but also couples that want to go through the disc just to see how to communicate with each other. So, tell us a little bit more about what the audience can do for you at this point in time.
So, well, I have a lot of fun on LinkedIn. So I would encourage people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post videos, random articles, to share with my friends. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're interested in getting a disc assessment, Andrew will have all the contact information for me after the show for how to connect on LinkedIn. I do also have a personal, Instagram page. And then if you're interested in executive coaching, leadership coaching, or advisory services, like I work well with these guys and would love to be an additional resource. And then I also have a comically simple book because again, like I know that everybody has so much going on and I am a high I and easily it's so like, I'm just like, hey, here's this information. It's things to keep in mind. And it has to do with the posture and like that physical wellness, mental wellness, communication time. It's something I call the PMCT relationship. So the book is called The Relationship Coach. It is available on Amazon and Andrew, we can get you a link for that as well. But other things you can do is just be the best version of you. And if you need help with that, let us know. We'll help. Because again, we're all in this together.
Outstanding. Karen, well, thank you so much again for your time, for your energy, for the research, for enlightening us again. And I think my brain's 3 times larger again just from another conversation with you. So I do appreciate that.
I'm so happy that you invited me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time and your energy and all you do each day, to you, to your team, and to everybody who's watching and listening. Appreciate it.